repeating that opening sentence because sometimes it gets cut off. So to repeat it, it's Monday, May the 11th, and I pray you're all doing well. It's good to see you, or at least it's good to be seen. Recording these videos is interesting because I really don't like to look at myself. I looked at the one from yesterday and Sunday, and I'd recorded it a lot closer, and I'm going, my goodness, what happened to me? I used to be young. And then when you got a close-up of your face, we put it on our TV at the house, and so instead of it being normal face size, my face is like 36 inches wide or something or other, and I'm looking at myself thinking, golly, you look old. And makes me realize, that we all are preoccupied with how we look. I don't need to be telling you ladies that. We all know it. We place a great deal of importance on how we look. And yet we know that looks can be deceiving, right? I'm reminded of a story in which there was a large Baptist-run camp somewhere out in the North Carolina region, and they have conferences and things all year long, and people go out there for training and Bible study and all that kind of stuff. And a few years ago, just before the conference started, people began noticing there was a young guy hanging around the grounds. He looked as though he'd had a hard time. He didn't look like he'd just stepped out of church or anything. His clothes were tattered and torn, and he just looked unkempt. And that wasn't the worst of it, but if you got close to him, you realized that he didn't have a lot of cosmetics or a lot of deodorant available because, the old BO thing struck. And so they just noticed him. He didn't make a big deal. He was there when they were feeding. He tried to sort of get in the line or whatever, but clearly he wasn't one of them, and not the kind of person that you typically see at a conference like that. But it came to one of the latest sessions in the conference, and it was announced that there would be a special speaker, and that the special speaker would be there tomorrow night. And so, lo and behold, the following night, it was announced just before that the speaker came up. The topic was announced as the verse that we've just recently read in Matthew. Inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And to everybody's amazement, and perhaps to some people's horror, up to the platform came that young man. And in fact, he was a pastor of a local church, and he had just let himself be dressed and go like that because he wanted to make a point. And he said, over the last week or two, y'all have basically ignored me. No one asked me if I needed help. No one invited me into the dining room. I came a couple of times, but kind of like everybody was looking at me like, what are you doing here? A couple of you put religious tracts in my hand, and a couple of you even gave me $1 or $2, but most of you just turned your eyes and pretended not to see me. And that made me, that story made me realize again just how much we depend on the look of people. I know I've told you before of one of the amazing qualities of our senior pastor, or back in the day, Pastor Tommy. Now, I don't know whether he's senior pastor. I think that's Luke now, but I don't know what Pastor Tommy's title is, but I remember commenting a number of occasions I was with him when we met somebody, and he would always congratulate them and tell them they were a great man of God, and I'd look at him and go, I don't know what you're seeing that I'm not seeing, but Pastor Tommy taught me a lesson that you don't judge people by how they look. He looked past that to see what their qualities were and what he believed they could be if God used them. It made me think back to a few thousand years ago when Israel was in crisis. You remember the story. Israel had demanded or had prayed and sought the prophet's help, that they wanted to be like all the other surrounding nations. They wanted a king. And we know that wasn't God's will, but they said, no, we want a king. And so what happened? They were given Saul. And Saul was head and shoulders above everybody else. He was a great looking man. But he proved to be a very poor king, a very poor choice for a king. And Paul ended up being moody and tyrannical. You remember all the stories about the kind of funk that he went in until David came and played his harp. But eventually it fell on Samuel's shoulders to find somebody else to be king. Somebody who would be worthy. And I don't care who you are, whether you be prophet or whatever, you probably got expectations as to what you think the Lord is going to say and who he's going to choose and how he's going to choose them. So let me just read to you. And the Lord said unto Samuel, how long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing as I've rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thine horn with oil, and go, and I'll send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hear it, he'll kill me. And the Lord said, take a heifer with thee, and say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. And call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I'll show thee what thou shalt do. And thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I shall name unto you. And so Samuel did what the Lord spake, and came to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming. Yeah, it's a wonderful picture. You just think of the elders wondering why the prophet of God has come into their midst. And the elders said unto Samuel, come thou peaceably? And he said, peaceably. I'm come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves, and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. And it came to pass, when they were come, that he looked on Eliab, and he said, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, nor on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For the man looketh on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. So you can read the rest of the story. I'm not going to read it all to you, but they went one son followed by another son. There was the tall one, there was the good-looking one, there was the one that was really smart. And one by one, the sons were paraded in front of the prophet, and the prophet said, no. The prophet heard from the Lord, that's not the one, that's not the one, until it's almost like Jesse turns around and says, well, that's them all. And Samuel said to Jesse, is this all of your children? And Jesse sort of said, yeah, well, there's the youngest one, but he's out tending the sheep. But Samuel said, you go send for him, and we're not going to sit down till he comes. Can you imagine that? The 7 brothers, the tall, the good-looking, the strong, each of them had been rejected. But eventually they came and they brought unto him David. And it says he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look at. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel, it says, took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of the brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. What a fantastic story. Tell you what, we have a tendency to judge from the outside. Now, I know I got into this by talking about me. I'm not trying to parallel myself into this other than to say that when I look in the mirror I'm disappointed by what I see. But so often we judge people and we judge circumstances by what we see. But we need to hear from the Lord, right? Better to be the youngest, the one that's out with the sheep, the one that nobody puts any faith, any confidence in. But if you have the Lord's anointed, you're going to end up being what David was, the greatest king that Israel ever had. So today, there may be some of you that are not respected based on outward appearances, based on what people say, based on what people see. We're quick to make judgments, but guess what? The Lord doesn't look on that. It says, but man looks on appearances. Sometimes that just means our face. Sometimes it means by what we think. Well, he can't speak, he can't minister. And we're quick to make judgments not knowing that the Lord has his hand. The Lord has a different plan. So today, that's my thought for Monday. My thought is don't pay attention to appearances. Okay, if you want to comb your hair a little. I think my wife told me to make sure my hair was brushed, and here I am outside. Don't make any difference. I'm grateful I still have some hair. But I just want you to know that what is precious to man is not necessarily precious to God, and I'd far rather walk in favor with him than walk in the admiration of others. How about you? And I pray that today the Lord will speak to you and whisper in your ear, you're precious in my sight. Even though man and even though others may go, well, that's just him or just her. No, it's not just him or just her. I believe we're called by God for a unique purpose. And you are, I am, and each of us are. Now it's up to us to set aside what others say about us and listen to what the Lord says. My thought for Monday. Sure love you all, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. God bless you. Bye-bye.